Hello everybody, welcome back to another Derriere Studio video, and this time I'm going to be talking about something that I saw recently, and it made me jog my brain a little bit. I thought it was definitely something interesting to talk about, but I'm going to keep this video brief because I don't want to go over topics that other people have talked about, so we'll just get started immediately, and we'll just talk about why people don't like having newish tech trees in War Thunder. And that's because a lot of the time, especially with the current state of War Thunder, a lot of the same vehicles have been added in multiple different tech trees. So you're basically playing very similar tech trees or having similar styles of play, which makes the grind just not that fun at all. And it makes it so that it's a lot less motivating or interesting to go for a new faction, right? Because once you've played America, Germany, and Russia, you would have basically played 99% of what the game has to offer in general content, and I'm trying not to focus too much on ground either, like air and ships. I think ships that I don't think have many duplicate vessels, excuse me, but at the very least you have air and tanks. They do have a lot of duplicate units in their tech trees, so I'm going to put forth some arguments as to why, you know, why you wouldn't do that, and what I would think my ideal situation would be for at least moving forward with this issue, not necessarily fixing it, because I don't think that what I'm going to say is going to fix it at all, but at least it will hopefully shift it enough to where someone else that is more knowledgeable could fix it, especially if they're a developer and they have a good idea, a way to implement it, whatever, right? So obviously the big thing is that if people want to add tech units to a tech tree, they, in my eyes, they should want to do it where there are gaps in BR, which makes it more difficult to create a lineup for that specific faction. For example, we'll pick 6.7. Obviously, Germany has a good lineup for that. Russia has a good lineup for that. I imagine America does as well, but I've not really played any of it at the moment, apart from the quick gameplay you're seeing now, which is for the challenges for the battle pass. But regardless, if you're going to be adding new tanks, you make them, if there is a gap in BR, at most it's like 1 BR between, so like you've got a vehicle at 5.0 and one vehicle at 6.0, or rather 5.7 and 6.7, things we're going on the 6.7 lineup. You want to make sure that there is at least a vehicle that is closer to 6.7 or at 6.7, so that you have another vehicle to add. Basing this off of at least having 5 vehicles in your lineup, because adding vehicles that don't really fill those holes really doesn't really help the issue that much, because yes, it's cool to have nice vehicles, but the faction will still suffer because of the fact that it still has holes, right? It still has weaknesses in the BR. They'll struggle at that. They won't have it as easy as time. Like, you can still play them, of course, but creating a good BR, good lineup for that BR is difficult. So if you're going to add any tank, you may as well do it there, because then it will give players peace of mind, saying that, and it'll makes it so that their job is easier when they're going to go out of that specific BR for whatever reason. My typical lineup as well is a lineup that has at least 3 vehicles. I would not count anything less as a lineup, because that's only a pair of vehicles, and we're going to get into the however many vehicles in the lineup that you need in a little bit, and then you'll see why. But 5 vehicles at least, because I think you can get 5 for free by spending Silver Lions on the crews. However, ideally in a lineup, there should be vehicles that should be efficient / fun to play, and I'm using them interchangeably, because if they're efficient, they can be fun to play, and if they're fun to play, you can make them efficient. It's like that. They're similar, not the same, but they can be used together, so I'll put them together so that you can use whichever one you feel is best suited for this. But at least two, so if one goes down, you're still not and you're not really out of the game yet, you can still use a vehicle that you're very much comfortable with at the very least, and you can play well with it. So you should have a mix of, you know, light tanks, medium tanks, blah 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 blah. You get the idea. But specifically something that you enjoy playing. And then you also have, ideally in this hypothetical lineup, a vehicle that does alright in up tiers. Now, would that make it absolutely just insane in down tiers? Maybe. Because that's generally how it goes about, right? If you're going into down tier, it's depending on how far that down tier goes, you'll smash everything. And if it goes in an up tier, it'll really struggle depending on how far that goes as well. But one vehicle that does really well in up tiers, or at least doesn't even have to do really well, just sort of well. So you can use it, but it'll be a bit of a struggle because there's an up tier, right? And then that would make that side of the game a little easier. That means that they'll be encouraged for whatever new unit that they're going to use, that unit will be able to hold its own. So I'm guessing a unit that has good survivability. It doesn't have to be, but I think in my general experience, any units that overpressure do really well in up tiers. When it comes to penning power, it's very hit or miss. So I think if it's going to be anything, it's going to be an overpressuring unit, so like 6-7 kilos TNT and a HE round, sort of like that. But why exactly, like, would people get these similar vehicles at all? Well, there's obviously many reasons for that. One of them is you can get more money for doing less work, because you already have that vehicle, you can just plant it in another territory and Bob's your uncle. Not something I really support. Feels a bit scummy. I do understand why they do it, but I don't like the fact that they do it this much. Because if they did it occasionally, that'd be fine. Especially if again, this is still on my ideal scenario for this. If you've been playing a faction, for example, and you've got a tank that you really like, or you've got a tank that you're at least familiar with, you'll have, hopefully, that same tank in a different tech tree, in a tech tree that you'll hypothetically want to grind. And that tank will be a premium. So you'll get that, and maybe get another tank or a plane, and that'll make a pair. It's not a lineup, but it's at least better than one tank, right? And then that'll make that transition from one tech tree to the other easier, because, again, speaking hypothetically here, that all the researchable vehicles that you'll get, the free ones, they will behave quite differently to what you're already used to in this one faction, right? So making that transition from one faction to another being easier is a good move, I think, because at least the developers will still get money for the fact that people are buying vehicles, but the players will have a better time of the grind, because one, the motivation to grind will be better, because the reward they're going to get are new vehicles that they haven't at all seen before, that they don't at all get in this faction that they're already used to, right? Second of all, it won't feel so much like a grind, because again, it's a vehicle that they're somewhat used to, that they have played before, so it doesn't feel like they have to start from scratch, which I do know that it can put a lot of people out, having to start from the beginning again. And I know that's why the game is considered pay to progress. In this way, I think it's not too bad. It creates its own problems, but I'm not going to go into them, because that's not what this video is discussing. We could make that a separate one later on, though. But with that, they'll be able to grind out that faction a lot easier, and it makes it so that they'll have a lot more fun doing it, right? So there is that argument, but of course, with adding new vehicles, it makes it a lot more difficult to balance them against all the everything else that, you know, is in the game currently. Even if a lot of the tanks and planes that you can use, they are the same essentially, or very similar. Similar enough that they don't really get differentiated that often. So you want to be able to add a vehicle that's relatively easy to balance, although, like, I don't think any vehicle's easy to balance really, but I just want to point that out, because any person that wants new vehicles added means that the team has got to spend more time balancing that unit, and that's again another reason why there are so many duplicate tanks and planes in different BRs, because it makes it easy to balance, because it's essentially the same thing, you know? But new tanks, harder to balance, and it's harder to balance in the case of the details come from the small things, right? You get these tanks anyway, they're easy to balance, but I just want to point that out, because obviously people are excited for new tanks, but it doesn't really mean that they're going to be a good thing for the developers, because it means they will have to work a little bit harder to get it. But I can't really say for certain how much work goes into each tank. And then you have the thing as well of having sub-tech trees as well. Now, I think this is probably the best way to go about it, because otherwise you'll be adding loads of tech trees that just don't really mean anything because it's just not a tech tree anyone wants to play, and that's the simple fact of it. But if you had a sub-tech tree, it would make it way more likely that these vehicles were getting played, and I'd say that it's good because you could at least preserve some of the more unique or quirky vehicles that you may not have even heard before. Which then means you could look them up and stuff, and it means that they become more known, because I know for a fact that they're going to be, people will have their favourite vehicles, and they're going to ignore everything else, right? And that's what they're really going to care about. It's especially, it's not a big reason, but it is one of the reasons why people only really care about the big three. So, you know, if you're going to be adding vehicles, I would obviously try and make it a thing of add the vehicles that not many people have heard about before, so that it just brings them into the light, you know? It makes it feel a little more fresh at the very least. If it's going to be certain that they're going to add more content into the game that isn't going to be a rehash again. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about for today. It's a bit of a short video, I know, but I made it clear at the beginning that I didn't want to really talk much about what other people have been saying. I just want to put my thoughts down to paper very quickly and publish it as a video to see what you think, because I really didn't think about tech trees that much. I just kind of went along with it because I like collecting tanks. Most of the time, that is, apart from when I just play badly. But I want to put this out because it is quite an interesting issue. Definitely not an easy one to answer. Definitely, my solution definitely isn't the best one. So I'm hopefully, probably like this is a dream at this point, but I'm hoping for this issue to maybe not, the way I've explained it, I'm hoping for my, the points that I've talked about, the arguments that I've made, is to not solve the issue, but hopefully push it along so that it could develop into a solution at some point, so that maybe someone else can deal with it that's more experienced than I am, right? Because I'm only an idiot talking through a microphone on social media, right? But at the very least, hopefully you have enjoyed this video. Again, if you want to see more stuff like this, please stick around and stuff. If you have any thoughts about this topic specifically, put it down in the comments, obviously, and I'll have a look at them. And I'll see if I can get to replying as many as I can, because I would like to contribute, absolutely, but I don't know a lot about this. So, bear with me on that. But, yeah, once again, hopefully you do enjoy the video, and I'll see you next time.